Have you ever played a video game and just been blown away by how smooth everything is?
Oh, yeah.
Like the graphics and how quickly it reacts to what you do.
Yeah.
It's like magic, right?
It's pretty cool.
Well, that's the power of a well-crafted user interface, and that's where React.js comes in.
Yeah.
So today we're going to do deep dive into React components,
Okay.
the building blocks of these amazing user experiences that we all know and love.
Sounds good.
So React, it basically gives developers, I think, this superpower to create these web apps that are so dynamic and responsive. They almost feel like you're using like a desktop application. It's that smooth. It's that good. So for anyone listening who might be kind of new to React, can you break down what a component actually is? Like, what are we even talking about here?
Sure. So imagine a web page is like a house.
Okay.
You wouldn't just build the whole thing as one giant structure, right?
No, that sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah. So you break it down into rooms. You have the kitchen, the living room, bedroom, maybe a bathroom.
Right.
In React, each of those rooms is like a component.
Okay, so components are like these reusable chunks of code that each are like responsible for just one piece of the UI.
Exactly.
Like it's compartmentalized. It makes it easier to think about.
And just like you can rearrange the furniture in a room, you can reuse and recombine these components to create like totally different layouts and functionalities.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's kind of like modular, right?
Exactly.
Like Legos.
Yes, exactly. Like Lego.
You can build whatever you want.
Yeah.
So you mentioned these components have like life cycles. What's that all about?
So it's like every component goes through this like predictable journey, like from the moment it's created to when it's removed from the page.
Okay.
And at each stage of this journey, React gives developers special tools to control what happens.
So it's kind of like it's born, it lives its life, and then it dies.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So I'm guessing that's where these life cycle methods that we hear so much about, they come in.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some of them.
Sure.
I know there's a bunch.
Yeah, there's a few.
But like, what are some of the key ones that people should know about?
So one of the first and most important is component did amount.
Okay.
This is like the moment that a component is born and first appears on the page.
Oh.
So like if you're building a social media feed, for example, component did mount would be the perfect place to go and fetch all the latest posts from the server.
So that's why, like, sometimes when you load a really complicated web app, there's like a loading spinner or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Behind the scenes, a component is like working hard.
Yes.
To fetch all the data.
In the component did mount phase, that's usually where that happens.
Okay. That makes sense. What about when like things change within the component? Let's say if you're, I don't know, adding something to your shopping cart.
Right. Well, that's where component did update comes in.
Okay.
So like imagine that component saying, hey, something changed. I need to update myself.
So it's kind of like the component's like event handler for internal changes. Is that right?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So component did mount, we get the data. Component did update, something changes inside. What happens when a component is like no longer needed?
Right.
Like say I close a pop-up window or navigate to a different page or something.
Yeah, well, that's where the component gets to say goodbye with component will unmount.
Oh, okay.
And it gets to clean up any resources it was using.
So like timers and things.
Yeah, timers, event listeners, just anything that could potentially slow down the app if it just keeps hanging around.
Right.
So it just gets to clean everything up and leave.
It's like tidying up your room before you leave.
Exactly.
Makes sense. So we've talked about these lifecycle methods you keep mentioning, like a component state.
Right.
What is that?
So imagine the state as the component's personal memory. It's where it stores all the information that influences how it looks and how it behaves.
So like for our social media feed example, the state would include like what posts are being displayed.
Exactly.
Maybe like user preferences and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you've liked something or you're following someone, that kind of stuff.
And that's all stored in the state.
All stored in the state.
So it's kind of like a control panel with a bunch of knobs and sliders.
Yeah, you can think about it that way.
That control different parts of the component.
Yeah, different aspects.
Okay. So how do developers actually change the state? Is there like some secret code word?
Not quite a code word, but there are special functions for that.
Oh, okay.
In class components, it's called setState.
Okay.
And in functional components, it's useState.
UseState. But
you can think of them both as like memos you're sending to the component.
Gotcha.
Like, hey, something is different now. You need to update yourself.
Get with the program.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So every time the state changes, React has to, like, re-render the component, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To show the updates. But redrawing the entire page every time something small changes would be, I don't know, super inefficient.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That wouldn't be good.
No, it wouldn't be good.
So how does it handle that?
So that is where React's secret weapon comes in.
Ooh,
Yeah.
secret weapon. I like it.
Yeah, reconciliation.
Okay.
Instead of just like blindly redrawing everything, React does this really smart comparison between the old state and the new state
Okay.
and figures out like what is the absolute minimum it needs to change,
Oh, that's cool.
and then only updates those specific parts of the actual web page.
So it's like constantly optimizing behind the scenes
Exactly.
to keep the UI nice and fast and smooth.
Exactly.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm starting to see why React is so popular.
Yeah.
It takes care of a lot of the hard stuff for you.
Yeah, it makes things a lot easier on the developer.
Yeah, well, this has been super helpful. So, like, to wrap things up, for our listeners who are out there and, like, itching to build their own amazing React apps, any, like, final thoughts for them? Like, what should they be thinking about?
So I think, you know, we've talked about components, we've talked about life cycles, we've talked about state management. And you can think about, like, how can you use these concepts to create an interface that isn't just functional, but it's truly delightful to use.
Right.
Like, think about an interface that anticipates the user's needs and responds in this way that feels intuitive and engaging.
Yeah, so not just, like, doing what it needs to do,
Right.
but doing it in a way that is actually enjoyable to use.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, so think about that, everybody.
Yeah.
How can you use these concepts to build something awesome?
Yeah, have fun with it.
That's our deep dive on React components.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.